There was a penny underneath the shoe, which is a German tradition for prosperity in marriage. They just tape like a penny underneath the bride's shoe and gives them good luck. And so I taped a penny underneath her hair.
Stuff. Okay, Isabel, yours is best.
So I wanted to give you something that would send you into this marriage on like a good step.
Christine Brown once lived under rules so strict, they reached into every corner of her life. Her clothes had to cover, her body had to remain hidden, her affection carefully measured, and her desires silenced. Yet, in the very same household, Robyn Brown was handed lace from Victoria's Secret, encouraged to embrace sensuality, and showered with romantic gestures that Christine could only dream of. How does one man justify holding two women to completely different standards under the same roof? How can something as personal as love and intimacy be turned into a weapon of favoritism? These aren't just small details of a polygamous marriage gone wrong. These are cracks in the foundation of a family that was sold to millions of viewers as sister wives, a family built on unity, fairness, and equality. But when we look closer, when we compare Christine's reality of repression to Robyn's reality of indulgence, what we see is not equality at all. We see a system designed to keep one woman small while elevating another. We see rules that were never about faith or family values, but about power, control, and manipulation. And that raises the real question: was Christine ever meant to thrive in Kody's world, or was she always destined to play the role of the obedient, discarded wife, while Robyn enjoyed the privileges of being the favorite? Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and welcome back to TLC's Sister Wives Daily. Today we're diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping contrasts in the entire Sister Wives story: the shocking difference between Christine's modesty rules and Robyn's lingerie indulgence, and what those differences reveal about the truth behind Kody Brown's so-called equal love. This isn't about gossip for gossip's sake. This is about uncovering the hypocrisy that defined the Browns' marriage dynamic and exposing how favoritism destroyed not only Christine's confidence, but also the entire foundation of this family. And trust me, once we peel back the layers, the picture that emerges is far darker than TLC ever showed us on camera. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. And before we start, if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and join the conversation in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts and experiences. It's what makes this community so powerful: ability to cover, to obey, and to sacrifice. And when she married Kody Brown, she didn't just step into a marriage. She stepped into a role that demanded obedience at the expense of her own joy. For Christine, modesty wasn't about choosing what made her feel comfortable. It was about layers upon layers of garments that dictated how much of her body she could reveal. Her clothes weren't chosen to reflect her personality or confidence. They were chosen to keep her in line with a rigid system of values that told her, your body is not your own. Every choice you make about how you present yourself must serve the higher purpose of humility, obedience, and control. In her memoir, Becoming Sister Wives, Christine has spoken about how she felt constantly shamed when she even hinted at wanting more intimacy, more closeness, more equality. Affection wasn't freely given to her. It was rationed like something she had to earn. And often, she came up short. While Robyn was celebrated for being Kody's new spark, Christine was told to repress, to be patient, to accept that her desires, both emotional and physical, were secondary. We saw it on the show in subtle but devastating moments. Think back to the early seasons, when Christine expressed frustration about not receiving the same attention or affection that the other wives got. She often used humor to cover up her pain, but you could see it in her eyes. She was starving for validation. And when she finally voiced her feelings, Kody dismissed her as whiny or complaining. He never asked himself why she felt that way. He never admitted that maybe the rules he enforced were suffocating her. But those rules weren't just about clothing or public behavior. They were about Christine's identity. She was expected to be the cheerful, dutiful wife, the homemaker who cooked, cleaned, and raised children without asking for more. And when she did ask for more, when she dared to demand respect or affection, the rules shifted. Suddenly she was being selfish or immature. It was a no-win situation. Christine could never meet the standard because the standard wasn't about fairness. It was about control. What makes this even harder to swallow is the contrast. While Christine was taught to restrain her sexuality, to keep her desires under wraps, Robyn was encouraged to embrace hers. TLC cameras captured the infamous Victoria's Secret shopping trip, where Kody proudly gifted Robyn lingerie. And while that scene was played off as playful and romantic, for Christine it was a slap in the face. She had spent years hiding herself under layers of modesty clothing, told that her body and desires were shameful. Meanwhile, Robyn was being rewarded for the exact opposite: open sensuality and indulgence. The hypocrisy couldn't be more blatant. Christine was told that modesty was godly, that her role was to suppress. Robyn was told that sensuality was beautiful, that her role was to indulge. And both rules came from the same man, Kody Brown. Imagine living that double standard day in and day out. Imagine watching your husband light up when he looks at another wife, while barely noticing you when you walk into the room. Imagine knowing that your clothes, your behavior, your very identity are being judged through a lens of obedience, while someone else is being celebrated for breaking every rule you were forced to follow. That's not love. That's humiliation dressed up as faith. Christine has admitted in interviews that this dynamic broke her down slowly, over years. She felt like she wasn't enough. Never thin enough, never spiritual enough, never obedient enough. And that's the point of these rules. They aren't designed to guide. They're designed to remind you that you will never measure up. They keep you small so that someone else can shine brighter. On the show, we even saw Kody use these rules as a weapon. When Christine began to express unhappiness in later seasons, he flipped the script on her. He accused her of being not committed to the family. He implied that her decision to leave wasn't about years of neglect, but about her inability to live up to her responsibilities. He weaponized faith and modesty to paint her as the problem, when in reality, the problem was his blatant favoritism and neglect. And let's be honest, this wasn't just suffocating, it was cruel. Christine wasn't asking for anything extraordinary. She wasn't demanding expensive trips or special treatment or even lingerie. She was asking for the basics: affection, respect, and equal partnership. But the rules were stacked against her from the very beginning. They told her that to ask for those things was selfish, while Robyn's every indulgence was justified as love. When we look at Christine now, confident, thriving, remarried, glowing, it becomes painfully clear just how much those rules robbed her of. She's finally able to express herself, to live freely, to love and be loved without conditions. And that transformation tells us everything we need to know. The rules weren't protecting her, they were suffocating her. They were never about faith, they were about keeping her in her place, while Robyn took center stage. And that's why Christine's story, Matt, matters so much. Because it shows us how favoritism operates quietly, under the cover of religious rules and family values. It shows us how a woman can be erased, not by one big act of betrayal. Robyn Brown's entry into the Brown family was painted on the show as a fairy tale. She was the fresh start, the woman who brought new energy, new children, and a new vision of polygamy that TLC could market as modern and appealing. But if you peel back the glossy production and the staged family meetings, what you find is something much more raw and unsettling. Robyn wasn't just another wife. She was the exception. The rules that bound Christine, Janelle, and even Mary for decades suddenly evaporated the moment Robyn appeared. The clearest, almost shocking example of this is the Victoria's Secret shopping spree. Imagine the scene. Christine, who had been told for years that modesty was her sacred duty, who believed that her role as a wife was tied to hiding her body and silencing her own desires, now watches as Kody brags about buying Robyn lingerie. Not just lingerie, lacy, romantic, indulgent lingerie from one of the most overtly sexualized stores in America. It wasn't just a shopping trip, it was a statement. A declaration that Christine's sacrifices meant nothing, because in the end, Kody's affection wasn't bound by faith or fairness, it was bound by favoritism. And this favoritism didn't stop with lingerie. Time and again, the show documented how Robyn was granted visible affection that the other wives were starved of. Kody held her hand, kissed her openly, and wrapped her in embraces that felt like love stories in motion. Compare that to Christine, who literally begged for attention and often found herself humiliated on camera when her attempts at intimacy were brushed aside. Christine was made to feel like she was asking for too much, yet when Robyn received 10 times more affection, it was framed as true love. One moment that fans never forgot came during family outings. While Christine and Janelle were left to juggle kids, logistics, and emotional labor, Kody always seemed glued to Robyn's side. He walked with her, sat with her, touched her, laughed with her. The optics were impossible to ignore. This wasn't a man balancing multiple marriages. It was a man parading his favoritism in front of the women who had already sacrificed everything for him. And then there were the trips. Robyn was treated to special getaways, honeymoons, and quality time that Christine never got. Christine once admitted that she longed for something as simple as one-on-one dates with Kody, moments where she could feel cherished, desired, and important. Instead, she got scraps. Meanwhile, Robyn was whisked away on romantic weekends, her needs and desires prioritized without question. Again, this wasn't about money or gifts. It was about the symbolism. Trips represented investment. They were proof of commitment. And Kody's willingness to invest in Robyn while neglecting Christine spoke volumes about where his heart truly was. This contrast becomes even more painful when you place it against the backdrop of Christine's lived reality. She wasn't just competing with another woman for a man's attention, she was competing against an entirely different set of rules. Christine was bound by a cage of expectations. Cover your body, be modest, restrain your desires, never complain. Meanwhile, Robyn was celebrated for receiving the very things Christine was punished for wanting. And that begs the question, how could Christine not feel like a second-class wife? Every gesture Kody gave to Robyn was a reminder of what Christine had been denied. Every kiss, every trip, every luxury gift wasn't just about love. It was about hierarchy. Christine was constantly reminded that her loyalty and obedience didn't make her cherished. They made her expendable. From my perspective, this wasn't love at all. This was performance. Kody wasn't simply spoiling a wife he adored. He was making a statement to the rest of the family. Robyn is the priority, and you will all have to live with it. That's not romance. It's a power play. And it worked because Christine internalized that message for years. She told herself she needed to be more patient, more forgiving, more faithful. But no matter how much she gave, she could never compete with what Robyn received freely. It's devastating to imagine Christine sitting in her home, watching Robyn flaunt gifts or affection, while knowing deep down that she had never been given the same chance. To Christine, it must have felt like rejection layered on rejection. She wasn't just unwanted, she was invisible. And let's not forget how Robyn herself played into this. Robyn positioned herself as the martyr, the woman who didn't want to be the favorite, who constantly cried about fairness. But her actions told a different story. She accepted every gift, every trip, every privilege without hesitation. She never turned down the lingerie. She never said no to the honeymoons. And while she might have shed tears about the pain of polygamy, she still benefited from every exception Kody made for her. That's what makes this so enraging. Christine was held to rules she didn't create, rules that suffocated her identity and diminished her role as a wife. Robyn, meanwhile, was handed freedom and luxury, and instead of questioning the imbalance, she leaned into it. She became the beneficiary of a system that hurt the very women she claimed to care about. The bigger picture here is that Kody used Robyn's exception as a tool of control. By showering Robyn with indulgence, he reminded the other wives of their place. It sent a chilling message. You are replaceable, you are not special, and you will never measure. Up to her. That's not just favoritism, that's emotional abuse. It created an environment where Christine's worth was constantly under attack, not because she lacked devotion, but because Kody needed her to believe she was less. And in the end, this double standard broke Christine. She could no longer tolerate the humiliation of living by rules that only applied to her, while watching Robyn reap the benefits of complete freedom. Walking away wasn't just about leaving a husband, it was about rejecting a system that told her she wasn't worthy of the same love, the same affection, the same dignity. As viewers, it's easy to focus on the lingerie moment as juicy gossip, But when you put it next to Christine's memoir, her tears, her exhaustion, and her lifelong sacrifice, it becomes something much darker. It's not just a scandal. It's the clearest example of how polygamy in the Brown family was never about equality. It was about control. And Robyn wasn't just the exception, she was the symbol of Christine's oppression. Money in plural marriage was never just money. It was power. It was influence. And in the Brown family, it became a weapon Kody used to reward loyalty and punish dissent. If Act 1 showed us how Christine was hemmed in by rules, and Act 2 revealed how Robyn was lavished with special treatment, Act 3 takes us to the very heart of what truly divided this family, the money trail. And once we follow that trail, the favoritism becomes undeniable. Let's start with what everyone remembers, Robyn's house. While Christine, Janelle, and even Mary were told to sacrifice and make do in rentals or smaller, more temporary living spaces, Robyn's dream home was presented as a non-negotiable priority. Kody fought for it, argued for it, and bent the entire family budget around it. He justified it by saying Robyn's kids needed stability. He claimed it was about family unit, but to the other wives, it was yet another glaring example that Robyn's needs were placed above everyone else's. Scratch. Meanwhile, Robyn was frequently seen with elaborate holiday setups, gifts, and experiences for her children. These weren't just seasonal differences, they were reflections of where Kody chose to invest his time and money. And time, as much as money, was a currency Christine never received in equal measure. When you step back and look at the entire picture, it's impossible to deny the imbalance. Robyn's house, her lifestyle, her projects, they were all funded and protected, even at the expense of the other wives. Christine's sacrifices, on the other hand, were ignored, minimized, or twisted into proof that she wasn't committed enough. And this is where the deeper truth lies. Kody wasn't just playing favorites with his wallet. He was sending a message. By consistently prioritizing Robyn's financial comfort, he reinforced her status as the main wife and reminded the others that they were secondary. Money was a tool of control, a way of shaping the family hierarchy without ever saying it out loud. For Christine, the financial inequality was more than just frustrating. It was soul-crushing. To live under rules that restricted her identity, to watch Robyn showered with intimacy, and then to see resources funneled into Robyn's comfort, while her own contributions were ignored, it was the final confirmation that she didn't matter in the way she should have. It's no wonder she eventually walked away. And as viewers, we have to ask ourselves, how many times did Christine swallow her frustration before it broke her? How many years did she watch Robyn's luxuries pile up while her own sacrifices went unnoticed? And what does it say about Kody as a leader, as a husband, and as a man that he allowed such blatant inequality to fester in his family? Because at the end of the day, this wasn't about money. It was about power. And when Kody used money to elevate Robyn and Dim, Inish Christine, he revealed the truth that had been there all along. Equal love was nothing more than a performance. Kody Brown has always thrived in the spotlight. From the moment Sister Wives first aired, he positioned himself as the magnetic center of the Brown family. A man with a dazzling smile, confident body language, and the kind of performative charm that made viewers believe he was a playful, fun-loving, slightly unconventional dad who somehow held an enormous family together. He leaned into humor, into his self-image as the cool polygamist, and he knew how to sell that narrative to a camera. But behind the polished image, Christine describes an entirely different man. In her memoir and in countless subtle moments caught on tape, the mask slips. The charisma that looked effortless on TV often evaporated at home, replaced by sharpness, condescension, or outright contempt. What the public saw as confidence, Christine lived as arrogance. What the audience interpreted as tough love or honesty, she experienced as belittling and humiliation. And that duality, the glowing public persona versus the harsh private reality, is perhaps one of the most devastating truths of Christine's story. Because it wasn't just that she was living with a husband who didn't love her. She was living with a man who turned their private imbalance into public theater, always ready to protect his image while sacrificing hers. Think back to early episodes where Kody struts into family gatherings with jokes and easy laughter. He's loud, energetic, and always ready to spin conflict into entertainment. Viewers saw him as relatable, even fun. But Christine recalls moments where, just hours earlier, he might have dismissed her concerns or minimized her feelings. She described trying to bring up issues. Her loneliness, her need for partnership, her fears, and being met with eye rolls. Sarki. As more cold avoidance, the same man who would crack a joke on camera could shut her down entirely once the filming stopped. Christine's memoir goes further. She admits that over time she began to feel invisible, not just ignored, but actively unseen by her husband. He mocked her habits, belittled her insecurities, and often withheld affection. At times, he treated her contributions to the family as if they were background noise. For Christine, the laughter the world saw didn't match the silence she endured at home. One of the clearest examples came during the family's struggles over moving from Las Vegas to Flagstaff. On camera, Kody positioned himself as the pragmatic, decisive leader, trying to shepherd his family through chaos. He framed Christine's objections as emotional or irrational, making it seem like she was the one resisting unity. But when you peel back the layers, Christine wasn't just being emotional, she was pointing out valid fears. The kids' schooling, the instability of moving yet again, the uncertainty of buying land. Still, Kody brushed it all aside, reducing her perspective to drama while painting himself as rational. That's charm weaponized. To the public, he's the calm man in control. To Christine, he's the husband who gaslights and discredits her voice. And this wasn't isolated to logistics. Even in moments of vulnerability, like Christine's concerns about intimacy or her longing for a deeper bond, Kody's responses often dripped with disdain. On the show, when Christine dared to say she wanted more from her marriage, Kody turned it into a televised debate about her lack of loyalty. He presented her needs as demands, her hurt as rebellion, and his detachment as principle. Behind closed doors, Christine bore the brunt of that double standard. Let's not forget the infamous intimacy is off the table revelation. Kody told Christine, point blank, that he no longer wanted a physical relationship with her, citing her lack of loyalty as the reason. For Christine, this was the final humiliation. Her body, her marriage, her entire sense of being a wife stripped away in a single declaration. Yet, in public appearances, Kody continued to posture as though he was a man doing his best to keep his family afloat, even implying that Christine's decision to leave was selfish or premature. He wanted to control the narrative, to keep his charm intact for viewers, while leaving Christine to live with the private wound of rejection. What makes this contrast so painful is that audiences often bought into Kody's image. Fans debated Christine's complaints, with some assuming she was being dramatic because Kody looked so jovial on TV. This is the cruelest trick of all. The camera catches the smile, not the silence. It records the hug in front of the kids, not the cold shoulder later that night. It frames Kody as the jokester dad, but it never stays long enough to capture Christine crying alone after yet another dismissal. Christine herself has said that her breaking point came when she realized the disparity wasn't temporary. She wasn't going to earn back intimacy. She wasn't going to win back affection by being patient or loyal. The contempt had become permanent, a private reality she could no longer excuse. Watching Kody laugh with Robyn in public, only to withdraw from Christine in private, finally stripped away her ability to believe in the illusion. From a commentary standpoint, this is where the story of the Browns becomes more than just polygamy drama. This is the psychology of control. Kody knew how to play to the cameras, to maintain the appearance of the benevolent husband juggling impossible demands. That public image gave him cover. It allowed him to discredit Christine's pain because viewers saw a different man, the smiling father of 18. And in many ways, that's the tragedy Christine had to live with. The world seeing her husband as charming while she knew him as contemptuous. It's also a reminder of how easy it is for audiences to miss the real story. Reality TV shows us a version of truth, curated and cut to maintain narratives. But even raw footage can't capture what happens when the cameras are gone. And in the Browns' case, the most damaging parts of Kody's behavior weren't the explosions the world saw. They were the quiet, cutting dismissals Christine lived with for decades. Christine's strength lies in exposing this duality. By telling her story, she reclaims what the cameras couldn't show. She forces us to confront that Kody's charm wasn't proof of fairness or love, it was a mask. And behind that mask was a man who belittled, rejected, and ultimately abandoned the woman who had built so much of his family's foundation. For me, the hardest part of revisiting these episodes is realizing how often Christine smiled through it. How many times she put on a brave face, laughed politely, or played along while inside she was crumbling under the weight of contempt. That, more than anything, highlights the cruelty of the contrast. Public charm can be disarming. Private contempt can be soul-crushing. And Christine had to endure both. Christine's story within the Brown family isn't just about rules, favoritism, or even money. It's about the long-term emotional impact of being undervalued and neglected inside a marriage that was supposed to be built on love and equality. The scars of this neglect run deep, and when we peel back the layers of Christine's experience, we uncover not only her personal heartbreak, but also the ripple effects it had on the children, the wives, and the very foundation of the Brown household. For years, Christine lived in a state of quiet suffering. She smiled for the cameras, she played the part of the supportive wife, but behind closed doors, she was lonely. She has described in her memoir and in interviews how the const and neglect chipped away at her confidence, leaving her to wonder if she was even worthy of love. Imagine giving everything, your youth, your energy, your devotion, only to be met with cold indifference or outright rejection. Christine wasn't simply unloved, she was openly dismissed. That does something to a person's soul. Fans could feel this loneliness seeping through the screen long before Christine found the courage to say it out loud. Time and again, TLC's cameras caught her sitting off to the side, excluded from Kody's affections, watching him wrap his arms around Robyn. The look in Christine's eyes said everything. It wasn't jealousy in the shallow sense, it was heartbreak. It was the look of a woman realizing that her marriage had become a performance where she no longer had a starring role. And then there was the humiliation. Christine wasn't just neglected, she was often mocked. Kody, in his confessionals, dismissed her needs as childish or silly. On camera, he rolled his eyes at her concerns, belittled her emotions, and minimized her pain. Think about what that must have felt like, to have your struggles broadcast to millions of viewers, only for your husband to treat them as inconveniences. That level of public disregard compounds the private pain. The emotional toll wasn't limited to Christine alone. The children saw it too. Her kids watched their mother try to hold the family together while being pushed aside by their father. Imagine the confusion of growing up in a household where one parent is clearly prioritized, while your own mom is left to pick up the emotional scraps. Christine's children, particularly Aspen, Mykelti, and Paydon, often stepped in as emotional support for her, blurring the lines between parent and child. They felt the weight of their father's neglect, and it shaped their view of marriage, family, and loyalty. This dynamic also maiupai and affected the relationships between the wives. Polygamy is often sold as a system of sisterhood, but how can genuine sisterhood exist when one woman is clearly elevated above the others? Christine's connection with Janelle grew stronger because they shared the experience of being sidelined, but her relationship with Robyn was poisoned from the start. Every act of favoritism toward Robyn, whether it was money, attention, or affection, was a reminder to Christine that she was considered second class. What's even more devastating is how these dynamics broke down the entire family structure. When one wife is publicly adored and the others are left to manage their own households in isolation, the sense of unity crumbles. The kids stop seeing themselves as part of one big family and start identifying only with their immediate households. That's exactly what happened in the Browns' case. By the time Christine decided to leave, the family wasn't functioning as a unit anymore. It was splintered beyond repair. But out of this heartbreak came something powerful: Christine's decision to walk away. Leaving wasn't just about escaping neglect, it was about reclaiming her dignity. It was about saying, I am worthy of love, respect, and attention, and I will no longer settle for less. That choice was both heartbreaking and empowering. It was heartbreaking because it meant giving up on a dream she had devoted decades of her life to. But it was empowering because, for the first time, Christine put herself first. Fans all over the world saw themselves in Christine's story. They saw the courage it took to stand up and say, enough. They related to the loneliness, the neglect, and the humiliation. And when Christine finally chose herself, it felt like a victory for every person who has ever been told they weren't enough. Her courage validated the pain of so many viewers who had lived through similar struggles. What makes Christine's journey so compelling is that it wasn't just about leaving a marriage. It was about breaking free from a system that thrived on her silence. For years, she was told to keep her head down, to obey, to accept her role. But when she finally broke those chains, she showed the world that survival is not the same as living. True living requires love, respect, and equality, things she never got from Kody. And that's why Christine's story matters so much. It's not just a personal story of one woman leaving a polygamous marriage. It's a universal story about the human need for dignity and love. It's about the emotional cost of being neglected and the strength it takes to walk away from a life that diminishes you. Christine's departure was the beginning of the end for the Brown family, but it was also the beginning of her freedom. And in that freedom, she became not only a role model for her children, but also a symbol of empowerment for millions of viewers. 2 women, 2 completely different sets of rules, all under one roof. Christine's world was governed by garments, layers, and silence. Her identity carefully muted, her body hidden, her voice minimized. Meanwhile, Robyn's world was defined by lace, perfume, and indulgence. Her femininity praised, her desires validated, her every need catered to. And at the center of it all was Kody, the man who enforced these rules not as a matter of faith, but as a matter of control. When we circle back to this contrast, it becomes impossible to ignore what really happened in the Brown household. Christine wasn't asked to live modestly because it brought her closer to God, or because it strengthened her marriage. She was asked to do it because it kept her small. It kept her in a place where she couldn't question, couldn't rise, couldn't demand the same treatment Kody was so freely giving to Robyn. And Robyn wasn't given lingerie simply because she was a new wife or because Kody was feeling romantic. She was given that gift as a message, one that said, "You are special, you are different, are the priority." That is what favoritism looks like when it becomes a system. It's not just about who gets the bigger house or who goes on more dates. It's about creating an environment where one woman is exalted and the others are diminished, until eventually they begin to believe that's all they deserve. Christine, for years, lived under that shadow. She played the role, she followed the rules, she accepted the lack of affection, and she tried to convince herself that this was love. But deep down, she knew. She knew the scale was tilted, and no matter how faithful she was, no matter how hard she worked, she was never going to be treated equally. And that's where the heartbreak truly lies. Because this wasn't just about Christine as a wife. It was about Christine as a woman, as a mother, and as a human being. She was teaching her children to see her being treated as less than, and at the same time, trying to convince them that this family was about unity and fairness. Imagine the strength it took for her to eventually stand up and say, "Enough. I will no longer accept scraps of love. I will no longer let my daughters watch me be diminished. I will no longer live under rules designed to break me. When Christine left, it wasn't just a divorce. It was a revolution within that family. It was proof that no amount of control, no amount of favoritism, no amount of manipulation could silence her spirit forever. And in that moment, viewers around the world weren't just watching reality TV. They were watching a woman reclaim her worth. Fans who had been shouting at their screens for years finally saw the justice they'd been waiting for. So when we compare Christine's garments to Robyn's lace, we're not just talking about fabric. We're talking about identity, dignity, and survival. We're talking about the difference between repression and indulgence, between erasure and celebration. And more importantly, we're talking about a system that was never designed to be equal, no matter how often Kody claimed otherwise. Christine's story reminds us that hypocrisy can hide